He had a tradition. He would send his victims something before killing them. A calling card. The Mexican passion flower.
Now, today we're going to be talking about Tommy versus Miguel Garcia. Or after episode 6, after Miguel found out that Maria was pregnant, I think we can finally move over to the moment where we can actually talk about them creating an unlikely alliance against both CBI and the Marquez cartel. There was also a big clue in the synopsis for episode 7, some players would be creating an unlikely alliance, and I definitely think this is one. There will of course be others which I do think will surprise us, but this is one alliance that I do think we all knew would happen at some point. It was just a matter of when, not if, and the question that we were really asking earlier on in the season was, what would actually bring them together? Well, it was Maria being pregnant. I do think next up there will also most likely be a scare when it comes to Maria, and that will only bring Tommy and Miguel even closer. So when and if something happens to Maria along with everything else that is happening, for example, if we do see JP's death, that is something that will definitely make them more of a unit. But that's the topic of discussion in today's breakdown. What happens next? What happens next now that Miguel Garcia has received the Mexican passion flower from Roberto Ortega, and how does the team of Tommy and Miguel work? As always, within this scenario there are also other characters like Maria, there's Roberto Ortega, and also his new hitter, Titus. So, we're definitely going to round off with where everybody is on the chessboard with this situation, as well as a particular scenario where I can see Miguel even putting himself in front of Tommy to take a bullet, sacrificing himself. So stick with this video right through to the very end, as we get into the home stretch for Power Book 4 Force Season 3. Now we all know all season long Miguel has wanted Tommy dead. He was obsessed with killing Tommy and taking him off the map mainly for two reasons. He was dating his sister, which he never really approved of, that's number one. Number two, ever since he came to Chicago, Tommy has been an absolute nuisance for everyone here. He went straight over to Che to become the Connect, replacing the Serbs right towards the end of Season 2. Since then, business has been down quite badly for the Insane Princes. Tommy and the CBI have scooped up a lot of territory, they poached a lot of customers that used to belong to the Serbs and Miguel. Tommy also torched his warehouse full of product earlier on in Season 3, which meant there was also a drought for Miguel's customers, which in turn allowed him to poach even more. We then saw these confrontations early on, but Miguel couldn't attack Tommy directly because then that impacts Che's organization and money, and you never mess with a Connect's money. He did also warn Tommy and Miguel towards the end of Season 2, competition in the streets is healthy for business, but don't take it further than that. So Miguel's plan was to actually outsource the hit. Initially he did call in a hitter, but we know these hitters in the world of power are an absolute joke. I do think that's one thing that definitely needs to change going forward when it comes to legacy. When they make statements like the Four Horsemen or the best hitter on this side of the pond, they have to show us why. That's one thing that was great about Power, even though the Jamaican hitters got dealt with by Milan. For a moment when you watched this for the first time back in Power, you probably thought, how on earth is Ghost going to get out from this situation? You even looked back at Tariq thinking, yeah, I'm pretty much done here. Again, back in Power, Pink Sneakers caused absolute chaos back in Season 1. She sliced up Annabelle, she hit Holly in Club Truth, she also stabbed up Ruiz as well in a club. Pink Sneakers was definitely no joke. Now that's what you call a hitter. With these hitters that we've recently seen in the Power universe, none of them even come anywhere near Pink Sneakers. They've definitely been a complete and utter joke. So hopefully that's definitely one thing that does change going forward when we get to Power Legacy, outside threats that are genuinely threats. But we then saw Miguel making a phone call to Roberto Ortega of the Marquez cartel. Miguel had enough and decided to make an alliance with not just one of Tommy's enemies, but an enemy of the Estrada cartel. He made a deal to give the Marquez cartel Tommy, along with a foothold in Chicago by becoming their distributor. But in episode 6, Miguel Garcia was also warned himself. If he didn't deliver Tommy Egan as he promised, then he will be the one who receives the Mexican passion flower himself. Which is very similar to the Jimenez cartel. I do think every cartel has their own signature. For those who have seen Narcos or any kind of Mexican drug cartel documentaries, you guys would know these cartel guys do not mess around. When they make a promise or if they've been betrayed, if they're not paid, if it's a revenge attack, they will make it known who was behind the attack as a message. They're not scared of leaving a message for rival cartel gangs, law enforcement, or even politicians. Back in 2019, El Chapo's son was caught by the Mexican authorities, but the Sinaloa cartel caused absolute chaos in the streets, which then forced the Mexican president's hand. He had to release him. If you don't play ball with these cartel guys, you can be damn sure they will send a message, sometimes even before they make the hit, just like Roberto Ortega did in this instance. For the Marquez cartel, it was tradition for Roberto Ortega's grandfather to send his victims a Mexican passion flower before he killed them, and when he gave this story, I do think we all knew it was TikTok for Miguel. And I really do love what they've done with this season. They've gone with the cartel vibes even more so than season 2. I've previously even spoken about how I would love Power to maybe take it overseas to Mexico.
Our goal is the prosecution of one of the most notorious drug traffickers in our hemisphere, Felipe Lobos.
On top, Ma. From now on, I need you to distribute double the amount of crime. I need to be unreachable, invisible, so I can stay invincible. No comprende.
One day, you will find yourself standing right here.
Now, the highest bidder at that time was a man named Lobos. He took one look at me and he just knew I had a price. And he was right. You see, I sold him to the feds for my freedom, Tariq.
I do think it would be quite different. I think we'd enjoy seeing that element to Power from more of a cartel perspective. So this part to Power Book 4 for Season 3 definitely is giving a different vibe to Power Book 4 Force. Now, what changed in Episode 6 was the moment he found out Maria was pregnant. Even after Tommy helped him with the 500 grand, even after he bailed him out with Cruz and Che, he was still planning on actually getting rid of Tommy. That's how slimy of a character Miguel Garcia actually is. But what changed was finding out that Maria was pregnant. One thing about Miguel Garcia, which I think we all would have noticed from early on in Season 2, is that he's very big on family and would do anything to protect his family. We saw what he did to Kendall when he put his hands on Maria, he took his hands away. Miguel is very big on protecting his family because there aren't that many left. So when he heard about Maria being pregnant, in that moment he probably thought, how can he take that away from his baby sister, despite what he thinks of Tommy? He's just found out that he's going to be an uncle. In that moment, how can he take away this baby's father before the baby is even born, because of a problem that he has? That's when we saw his tone completely shift. He was laughing and joking with Tommy and Maria. They both agreed that Maria was stubborn. The mood completely shifted at the dinner scene from tension and awkwardness to more of a kind of a family feel. They were laughing and joking and kind of getting along for a change, and that was thanks to Maria's pregnancy. Sometimes they say death brings family together, as I'm sure many of us have probably all experienced at some point in our lives. When there's a death of a loved one, it often does bring family together, but this was the complete opposite. Maria's baby was the blessing. But again, the mood then completely shifted when Tommy didn't show up to the meet with the RDs, because then it was Miguel who received the Mexican passion flower in Tommy's place. So the Marquez cartel are now going to be coming after not just Tommy, but also Miguel Garcia and the Insane Princes. In the trailer for episode 7, we've got Miguel making sure the Insane Princes are ready. He knows the Marquez are going to be coming for them, so they have to be on red alert. But I think one thing we do have to remember is, Roberto Ortega is also about to be released from jail himself. I do actually think that happens fairly soon, because the whole case against the Marquez cartel is completely falling apart. That's been falling apart ever since early season 3. Markovich died in episode 1, Claudia Flynn was also the other one who agreed to testify against the Marquez cartel and Ortega, but she's now dead after episode 5. There was a wrong digit on the address of the warrant when they were arrested back in season 2. That was thanks to AUSA Seng. Ortega's lawyer has now also filed for complete dismissal of the case, which I do think will probably go through either in episode 7 or 8. So I definitely do think Ortega does walk soon. And then let's see if he can get the job done himself. Because I definitely know none of these hitters on Power have the juice to take out any of the main players. Titus will definitely get killed somehow one way or another. I also think Ortega will have some questions around who also set his cousin Gabriel up, because he'll for damn sure know it wasn't him that killed Claudia. He'll probably know that it was Tommy who was behind it, along with the death of his uncle. So now Tommy and Miguel have a few things in common, one of them being the Marquez cartel. I actually wouldn't be surprised if the Marquez cartel come after Maria as well and do target her. We know family is never off limits when it comes to the cartel. So as far as Ortega's concerned, family definitely is fair game. Not like the cartel need a reason, but I definitely wouldn't be surprised if they either go for Maria or a member of Tommy's family. Maybe that's something that brings Tommy and Miguel even closer, because we know how much they both love and care for Maria. If she's ever hurt, caught in the crossfire, or if there's a scare with a baby, both Tommy and Miguel will go the distance to protect her, together. So I do think whether it's Tommy being kicked out of CBI and a member of CBI catching Maria in a crossfire, or whether it be the Marquez cartel like Titus, Ortega, or any of the other members of the Marquez cartel coming for Maria, either one of those two scenarios, or maybe even both, will definitely bring Tommy and Miguel even closer together as one unit, which going forward actually benefits both working together anyway. Tommy will be kicked out of CBI after episode 7. I do think we all know that's coming after the fight with Diamond. Tommy still also has the Marquez cartel problem, and now both will now start to align with Miguel Garcia as well. You also add on top of the fact that Tommy's basically family, which I do think Miguel will consider him as going forward. The fact that you do also have Kate here in Little Village does give you the clue and hint that Miguel has probably opened his doors up for Tommy's family, so they're definitely going to be working together going forward. I also posted this on X not too long ago, and I mentioned the triangles that Gary Lennon has set up this season is absolutely insane. Alliances have definitely shifted, they laid the foundation in episode 6, and going forward, it does look like we're going to have Tommy, Miguel, maybe Shanti versus Jannard, Diamond, and Vic Flynn. It's going to be absolutely insane. They're going to start by completely breaking some of those relationships apart in episode 7 for new ones to definitely come together. And that will definitely be Tommy and Miguel working together against Ortega and CBI. And I do think it'll be with the additions of characters like Shanti and Raheem. However, is this now just all leading up to Miguel's death? Maybe even with a crazy sacrifice? I briefly touched on the topic of him potentially sacrificing himself to protect Tommy and Maria earlier this week. I do think over these last couple of episodes, they're going to completely flip our mindset when it comes to Miguel. And I wouldn't say they'll make him a fan favorite as such. Those fan favorites are characters like Liliana, but I do think they will flip the audience's perception, where we're actually going to be rooting for Miguel Garcia. Power definitely has a history of doing that sort of stuff by shifting alliances and shifting character story arcs at the drop of a dime, and I do think Miguel Garcia will end up doing the exact same. Where come the end, we're going to be thinking, damn, Miguel really went out as a real one. He went out by protecting Maria, or he went out by sacrificing himself, or really stood by Tommy and his family and protected them at the expense of himself. Maybe there's even a situation where they go on the offensive against CBI or the Marquez cartel. There's a moment where Jannard has Tommy in his sights like he once did back in season 2. Jannard has Tommy in his sights, but because Tommy is now going to be a father, because Tommy and Maria have a baby on the way, Miguel then puts himself in the front of Tommy and takes that bullet for himself instead. A crazy sacrifice that just makes us think, damn, from Miguel wanting Tommy dead to now sacrificing himself to save Tommy. Which is what I definitely think they're leading up to. I do think Miguel will die at the hands of maybe the cartel or maybe even CBI. Either one of the two, I do think he is going to die. But by then, I'm sure our perception will have completely changed on Miguel. Now, just to kind of round off, another question I do have is a story around Che's son. Will that come back around? Or is that a story that will kind of just stay between Maria and Miguel? Because the only way that ever does come to light is if Maria tells someone or if Miguel mentions it. Other than them two, I don't know how Che ever finds out. It definitely is something to keep in mind. I don't think he'll also be too happy with the fact that Miguel is now also in a war with the Marquez cartel, so there is also that, but definitely an interesting subplot that may just be simmering in the background. But that's a wrap for Tommy and Miguel, and where we are on the chessboard when it comes to the beef with the Marquez cartel. I do think time is now ticking for Miguel Garcia, but before he goes, I do think they will change our perception of his character. Maybe he does even sacrifice himself and takes a bullet for Tommy, where he ends up going out as a real one, even though he has wanted Tommy dead ever since the beginning of season 3. But I do think that perception will change in these last 3 or 4. With that being said, drop all your thoughts down below in the comment section. Do you guys think Miguel survives? Can you see him sacrificing himself to save Tommy now that Maria is pregnant? Do you guys think Maria will survive? And where do you see this story heading with the Marquez cartel? Drop all your thoughts down below in the comment section. And as always, thank you guys for watching, and I'll see you next time.